everyone. Welcome to an extra coffee chat. That's so exciting. So I already made my cup of coffee, so no fancy coffee making portion to this video, but I really wanted to talk about, because it's been coming up, and it's been coming up for numerous of years, and I can't believe that I didn't think about recording a video of talking about this sooner. But I wanted to talk about how to find a therapist and also what you could ask in a consultation with the therapist. So I wanted to cover those bits. I did take a few notes just to try and cover all of the bases. Now, my notes and my discussion today are not all inclusive. There are definitely more questions and suggestions out there, but these are usually the tidbits that I give to potential clients that call, or potential clients that I do consultation with. These are some of the suggestions that I give, or to an existing client that I have that is transitioning off of my caseload because of any reason, moving, needing to change specialties of their services, things along those lines. So these are the tidbits that I give to clients, prospective clients, on how to find a therapist, and also what you could ask to your new potential therapist to get to know them better, and see if they're a good fit. So let's dive in. Okay, so naturally we got to start with, how do we find a therapist? So there's a couple of parameters around this that I think are important to start with before we open Google, and that is taking a moment to think about what you need or /want from your therapist. And what I mean by that is, think about what am I struggling with, and is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it grief? Is it life? Is it relationship? Because not every therapist specializes or works in any given area of all the areas of mental health. So think about what you want from your therapy, what you're struggling with, where you want the help in. That would be the first component. Next component that I would say is thinking about, of course, finances. What is the budget for therapy? Also, am I open to out of network? Do I need somebody that's within my insurance network? Do I need, somebody that is paneled with Medicaid, for example? So that's another really important piece, because not every therapist is on an insurance board or accepts insurance. For example, myself, I am an out-of-network provider, and in 2 of the states that I'm licensed in, Colorado and Kansas, I can't see anybody that is a recipient of Medicaid either. So that's an important component to think about as well. And I mentioned before insurance, I mentioned budget for session rates, because every therapist's rate is a little bit different. So for example, at our private practice at InFocus Counseling, we have different clinicians at different rating scales. For fully licensed clinicians, our session rate is $200. For candidacy license, they are $160. And then we also have student clinicians, interns, before they graduate, and they're at a $95 rate. Now, this is not the rate for anybody in our field. These are just our rates at our private practice, but I wanted to show you that depending also on the clinician's experience and license type that they have, their rate might be different. So something to think about, as well as when you're thinking about budget for your sessions and things like that. I would say the other component that could be helpful is, do you have a preference on, I want a male or a female therapist? Is there a particular person that you feel more comfortable chatting with? Now, I say this one a little loosely, just because I also am a firm believer that I might not initially want a male therapist, but I meet one, I consultate with one, and I do feel like this particular therapist is a good fit for me. So I say this one sort of loosely as a reflective point before you begin your search, just because of that. But I would say the other big piece is availability. What are you looking for on how frequent you want to have sessions? I want to have them twice a week, once every other week. I would like a monthly check-in, things like that. And then also like time of day or day of the week. So for example, my own schedule is I hold sessions Monday through Thursdays from 8 a.m. Mountain Time to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I don't do Fridays or weekends, and I don't have very many late evening appointments. So if that's a component that I want it on like a Saturday or a Sunday, like that's something to take into consideration as well. But being open and a little flexible as well, in case I can't find a therapist that has a Sunday availability. Can I make a Monday at 7 potentially work? So things like that to just kind of keep in mind, and just kind of know, like, to steer you in a direction. So those are the reflections before you pull up Google. So next is, where do I go to look? Because I've mentioned Google, and if you Googled, for example, anxiety therapist near me, you're gonna get a really long list. So how do I make it filter? How do I filter when that happens? And I would say that a really good filtering system, I recommend it more so than Google, is I actually recommend Psychology Today is an excellent website that has a really great filtering system that you can check a lot of boxes, including gender of therapist, telehealth versus in-person, availability, modality, like the treatment approach, what you're struggling with, insurance coverage, all of those components. So I really like Psychology Today, but there's also other websites as well that are very similar. I've actually done an Instagram post on where you can go to search for a new therapist, and I've listed some of these websites. So I would definitely, I'll add that link to that Instagram post in the description of this video. But those are excellent resources to utilize to help filter instead of feeling so overwhelmed by, let's say, 20 pages of Google anxiety therapists near me. The other thing I would say is that if you really want your health insurance to cover your sessions, what also can be helpful is that when you call and you ask your insurance for a list of mental health providers that are covered by your insurance, is to let them know, I'm looking for a depression therapist, I'm looking for an anxiety therapist, an addiction therapist, because when a therapist is added to an insurance panel, they give some of that information of what they treat. And if we just call and we just ask for, I'm looking for a mental health therapist, like, can you give me a list of approved providers? They're gonna send you also a really long list, just like Google. They're going to send you a really long list. You're not going to know how to like filter through it. You might pick 3 off of the top of the list, and fingers crossed, hope for the best. So I also usually suggest that of like, if you call and you ask your insurance for their provider list, just give a little bit more direction of like, I'm looking for somebody that specializes in grief, that specializes in anxiety, things like that. So the next part is how do I filter through all of these options? So we've gone through the insurance list, or we've gone through Psychology Today, and we've narrowed it down to the best of our ability, but we still have like a good handful of potential therapists, and I don't necessarily have time to chat or consult with all of them. How do I filter it down? So this is where I would suggest, like, all of us, typically, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of us, of course, have bios on our websites, and on Psychology Today, we all have a profile, and we add in our profile a bit of like what therapy's like with us. What is our approach? What's our viewpoint on therapy? What do we want our new prospective clients to know about us or our therapy approach? So I would suggest, like, yeah, take the time and read those bios, because listen to kind of like what you're feeling. You'll naturally feel sort of a draw to one profile over another, potentially. And I would say, listen to that, lean into that. If your gut, brain, either, is telling you like, hey, like, I think we might be a good fit, go for it. Reach out to them, and schedule, ask if they offer like free consultations. I offer free consultations. My consultation is a free 15-minute video consultation, completely no charge to the prospective client. It's completely free. 15 minutes for them to truly ask me questions. I want you to feel comfortable with me. So you ask me, what do you want to know about me? That's really important for you. That because I can only cover so much in my bios. What's really important? What do you really want to know about me to see if we're a good fit to work together? So I would say definitely read those bios, read the website, because we typically, and I say we as therapists try to portray as much of our professional self and also the modalities and the treatment and our approaches in our sessions into those bios. And so if you're feeling sort of a gut reaction, like, I think we might be a good fit, follow that, reach out. So those are some of like my suggestions of kind of how to start looking for a new therapist, and choosing potentially a new therapist. Now, let's chat more about consultations. Like I said, I offer free consultations, free video consultations, but I do know that not every therapist offers this. So it's good to always ask, and don't be afraid to ask, because this is a big decision. And so I think that it's a big decision. All the clinicians at In Focus Counseling identify that this is a big decision, and so we try to make that a little more comfortable decision, because it's a hard decision to make. We try to make it a little more comfortable to take that really first step into treatment by offering a free consultation. Chat with me, get to know me. Do you feel like this is a good fit? And then let's move forward from there. So just wanted to give that warning. So I kind of wrote down 5 of like sort of my top pointer questions that I would give to a friend, a family member, potential clients. I've also sort of given some suggestions to potential clients of like what they could ask to a prospective clinician or therapist to help them make this decision, because it's a hard one. I think that it's really important that you feel a connection and a comfortability with your therapist, because if you don't, I'm a firm believer that if you don't feel that comfortability and you're a little hesitant with your therapist, the hard work that you want and need to get done in therapy won't happen, because I'm too worried about what my therapist is going to think, or they're judging me, or I can't trust them with this information. It's a barrier. And so you have to have some level of comfortability with a therapist. And so I think that that's really important to have when you're seeking a therapist, is to keep that in mind. So the first question I would suggest a client to ask a prospective therapist is, what are your qualifications and how long have you been practicing? So this is a really good question, because it touches on quite a few different key aspects that the therapist should be answering, in the sense that like identifying what their license type is. So side comment here, there are a lot of different license types in mental health. Like, for example, I am a licensed professional counselor in Colorado, and then I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. They're the same license, just the states give them different titles, but I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in Kansas and Montana. There's also a licensed social worker, licensed addiction counselor, marriage and family therapist, licensed clinician. I also said earlier that there are candidacy license as well. And those would be, like, for example, licensed professional counselor candidate, so LPCC. And like there's a lot of different types of therapy license types out there. And don't get confused by that, but some of them do have different parameters that the professional has to work within. And so sometimes that can be helpful to ask about. Now I've mentioned a handful of times that I'm a fully licensed clinician. We have candidacy license. We have student clinicians at In Focus Counseling, and a lot of other practices have similar license types as well. But what exactly does that mean? Okay, great question. I'm so glad we're talking about this. So let's start from the bottom up. So a student clinician or an intern is a clinician that is getting their pre-graduation experience hours. And those experience hours could vary anywhere between 700 to 900 hours over the course of about a year and a half before they graduate. They have to do direct one-on-one therapy hours. They have to do some group hours. They have to do, of course, coordination of care and consultation and supervision, all of those components to be able to graduate with their master's degree. So those are interns or student clinicians. And then after you graduate, you apply and file with the state board, and you get your candidacy license, which is the postgraduate license. Now, each state is a little bit different, but for example, in Colorado, after you graduate, you need to complete 3,000 hours of experience hours over a course of 2 years before you can file for your full license. You also have to participate in a certain number of supervised hours a month, because you're still in that experience learning phase. And And I would say that we're all, whether we're fully licensed or candidacy licensed or we're student clinicians, we're always still learning because we have continuing education credits to fulfill for each license renewal. But these candidacy clinicians are still definitely learning as they're continuing with those experience hours post-graduation. So you get through those 2-year mark, and then you file for your full license, and then you really just focus after that on like your continuing education credit requirement for each new license renewal. And each state is also different on license renewals as well. Like, for example, Montana, I have to renew my license every year for my Montana license, but Colorado and Kansas is every year and a half, 2 years or so. I have to renew that. So that is kind of a little more explanation of those different types of licenses versus just LPC, LMFT, LAC, LSW, all those types of things. So there's license types. I would say that also when we're talking about qualifications, like this is the sort of the time where I also like to include my experience a little bit, or touching on it a little bit with clients, of my experience of treating something similar that they're struggling with. What's my experience treating that before? Have I treated it? Have I treated a lot of it before? Have I treated a few cases of it before? Have I never treated it at all? But I do feel like I can take the case, or I can't take the case. Things along those lines. So I would say like this is that point where you could kind of touch on that, or make sure that the clinician is touching on that, of their experience of treating what you're struggling with. Have they treated it before? So the second part to this question is, how long have you been practicing? So I have been practicing for 5 years, just under 5 years. And I would say that sometimes when we're looking for help because we're really, really struggling, we want the best. And I'm doing air quotes, and I'll tell you why I'm doing air quotes. But we sometimes associate the best with being the longest practice. Like, so for example, like 10 years in private practice, or in practice of mental health treatment. And I did air quotes earlier because of the best, because more years in practice isn't always the best. It really depends on how that clinician is continuously adapting with the evidence-based treatment, research articles, continuing educations, all of that. Like, how are we continuing to provide our clients with the best, most appropriate, up-to-date care and modalities and treatments, so that they can live the life that they deserve. So I wanted to say that piece, because more years doesn't always mean the best. And so I say that just to also encourage, like, not to immediately check somebody off the list only because they have 3, 4, 5 years experience in the field, not to necessarily check them immediately off the list. So, okay, question number 2 that I would ask would be, how do you, therapist, approach treatment? This is where we're going to get kind of talking more about like the therapist modality, how they view therapy, how they view the therapist-client relationship, all of those components. This is going to give you insight actually also to a little bit more of like the professional, personal side of the therapist. And I say that in sort of the connection of modalities is that as a therapist, we're not assigned modalities. When we go through grad school, we don't reach into a hat and pick out and say, oh, I'm now a narrative therapist, or our professor doesn't tell us like, okay, Jenny, you're actually going to be a person-centered therapist. That doesn't happen. We also don't pick our modalities just willy-nilly. There's a reason why we pick the modality that we chose to focus more on and utilize more. So, for example, I would share that the primary modality that I use in my sessions is cognitive behavioral therapy. The reason why I use that is because I connect really closely with the behavioral approaches. I like the connection between the thought, the emotion, and the behavior, and how they all interconnect and also feed off of each other. I worked for a handful of years in southern Wisconsin doing in-home therapy for young children struggling with autism spectrum disorder and Asperger's. And I was trained in applied behavioral analysis. I also really enjoyed that approach as well. Once again, we're connecting with that behavioral component, the understanding behind why we're doing what we're doing. What's the thought, what's the emotion tagged to the behavior? So that I would share that with a client, prospective client, which gives them insight that a handful of things actually. I just share that I did work and live near or in southern Wisconsin for a handful of years. I've worked with young children. I've worked with ASD. I shared my modality that I connect with. I shared why I like that modality very specifically, not just I like CBT and I just like CBT. Like I gave more of a full answer, an honest answer. So that's our little insight a little bit into the personal professional side of the therapist and why they chose the modality that they chose. So this is also the part where I actually usually start my consultations by giving the prospective client a rundown real quick of what to expect over the next 15 minutes. We cover a lot in 15 minutes, okay? But I typically say, this is what today's gonna look like. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but before, I wanna save a lot of this time for you to ask me questions, but before we do that, can you just tell me briefly about what's going on? And the reason why I do that is for this next point to question number 2 of how do I approach treatment is I want to know what's going on for the client so that while they're asking me other questions, I'm already thinking about what our sessions and this client's treatment could look like, what I hear, what I would suggest. I'm doing a tiny bit of treatment planning with them. And I feel like that helps a lot of clients feel like they're landing softer into therapy. That it's not necessarily like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I hear what you're struggling with, but we'll see how sessions go and we'll just adapt as we go along. No. I like to make sure that I'm giving them pointers. Of this is what I'm hearing right now. This is what I'm thinking would be helpful. And this is how I would suggest, at least based on our 10-minute conversation thus far, or 5-minute conversation thus far, I would suggest us doing our sessions. So I would say like that's included, and also when I'm asked like what is my approach to treatment. So third question is all about asking the financials, okay? I feel like this is a part that is commonly missed with a lot of anxious new prospective clients, and I understand. And sometimes I have to force, air quotes, force this information because they don't ask it. And so I want to make sure that I cover it. So making sure you ask about the financials, right? That's the important part. I have to be able to afford to come to see you. Unfortunately, I'd love to be able to give all of my services for free to help everybody, but I can't. So ask the financials, ask about the hourly rate, ask about insurance, ask about cancellation policies. Even though I already shared and is on my bio that I'm an out-of-network provider, I still welcome the question about like insurance coverage because it gives me the chance to let clients know that I produce a super bill. My computer system produces a super bill, which can be submitted to your insurance for potential reimbursement. Now that reimbursement is is all dependent on your out-of-network benefits on your insurance policy, but a lot of clients don't think about that. They just either hear, yes, I'm on your insurance, or no, I'm not. There is a little tiny gray in the middle there, depending on your out-of-network benefits. So I like to talk about that component. And then I like to share my cancellation policy, and I talk a little bit more about my cancellation policy in the intake appointment, but I do like to share the fee, the parameters of when it's enforced, the cancellation policy, when it's enforced. And then I also like to give the caveat that I'm human, you're human. I understand that life sometimes happens and we have no control over that. And so when life happens, I try to be as human as possible because I get that life happens. So I like to share that as well, that I try to take that human side with my cancellation policy. So next question is, how will I know it's working / how many sessions do you think that I'll need? I get usually the question of how many sessions do you think I'll need? I get that question more than I get the first one. But I kind of combine both in my answer. So when I'm asked how many sessions do you think that I will need, I like to give an answer. I like to share a little bit in the sense that, based on what you've told me you're struggling with, I have had clients that I have treated for similar, not the same, because everybody's anxiety, depression is a little bit different. I have had clients that have come for a handful of months and have been fine, and we have discharged, and they've moved on, and they got out of their sessions what they wanted. I've also had other clients that struggle a little bit more, and I've seen them for a handful of years. And so I'm honest in that sense, is that I also share my professional value, that I like to say, my goal in therapy, in your therapy, is to work myself out of a job. And what that means is I want to work to not keep my clients, but my goal is for them to reach their goals and be able to live the life that they want to, and they can leave me. That's what I mean by my goal is to work myself out of a job. So I say that, but to answer a little bit more of how do I know when it's working, a really big checkpoint of mine with my clients is, what's still bothering you? How is day-to-day life? What's still interrupting? Let's work on those things that are still interrupting. And also, are you starting to find, I use the word peace, but that word also changes depending on the client that I'm working with, because they connect with a different word. But for the sake of our video today, I'm going to say, how are you finding peace with living with depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, because they're not going to go away. That's what we always like hope for, but they're not going to go away. We're always going to have anxiety. We're always going to have some depression, but how are we living with it? How are we finding peace with it? So that's why I would suggest those questions. Make sure you ask those questions. And then my last question would be, what do you recommend on session frequency? What do you think that I need? What do you think if we moved forward, how often would you want to see me? This question I really base on what the client told me they're struggling with, and what they're wanting out of therapy. What they're wanting out of therapy in the beginning of the consultation. Because typically I have clients that come to me and they're in pretty severe anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms. And a lot of them are sort of on like the verge of a crisis, that they've gotten to the point with their symptoms where they feel like, I'm backed into a corner and I'm just trying to battle my way out. Help me. So my answer usually to this question is, I would recommend once a week, at least for the first month, if not the first month and a half, for us to be able to consistently build our foundation. Then depending on what you're needing, what you're wanting, we could decrease frequency to every other week or something along those lines, or once a month or something. But that's usually the answer I give. Now, on occasion, I will give clients the recommendation that based on what you're telling me, I would like to see you more than once a week. I think that would be really helpful for you to have that checkpoint. Now, sometimes I'll make that recommendation and the client will tell me, like, due to availability, finances, whatever, I can't do that. Can I still work with you? And I have the conversation that, like, yes, you're still more than welcome to work with me. But the less frequent we see each other means the more work that you're doing outside of session. So there's already so much time outside of session, between week to week sessions. There's so much time out there. Now, if we do every other week, that time has doubled naturally, right? So I just usually let them know that like, you're always going to leave my session with some sort of challenge to be practicing, to be working on before we meet next. If we see each other obviously every other week, that challenge, that practice is going to fall more to you. And also taking it a step further of, based on the conversation that I had with Jenny, what else can I be working or focusing on until I speak with her next? So those are like my top 5 questions that I usually recommend potential clients to ask a new therapist, that I usually touch on with prospective clients, because usually I hear a lot from prospective clients of, I don't know what to ask you. What do you think I should know? Like, they come to consultations and a lot of it's, they're sort of swimming in their anxiety, their depression, their obsessive compulsive disorder. They're swimming in it and they don't know what to ask me because they can't focus on that past what they're struggling with. And these are the areas that I typically cover when I'm, Jenny, just please tell me about yourself. I don't know what to ask. But I would definitely say that these are some 5 top questions that I would definitely make sure to ask a new potential therapist to get to know them and see, do I feel like we're a good fit to work together? So I wanted to share this just because, like I said, I have had a lot of consultations over the years. I'm coming up on 5 years in private practice. I've had a lot of consultations over the years where I get I don't know what to ask you, just please tell me about yourself. I've also helped family and friends give them ideas of like, hey, you're looking for a new therapist? That's wonderful. That's so great. Congratulations. Ask them these questions. Ask them about these questions so that you feel prepared and you feel like going into your intake, yes, I think I have landed in the right spot. So, thank you for watching this video. If you're watching this video, you might be in that first phase of deciding that I'm ready for a therapist or I'm ready for a new therapist, a different therapist. Congratulations. Best of luck in your search. I hope this video was helpful in kind of directing and answering some of those questions because I get it. Finding a new therapist is hard. There's a lot of us out there. And how do I find the one that's going to help me, that I feel a connection with, and I can work on the really difficult things? So best of luck, congratulations, and have a wonderful day.